Ladies and gentlemen, we are still mid-move, and I've got so much to pack up. Andy's going to take over the blog this week. He's going to talk about the Battlebots video games, what have come out, and how we haven't gotten a game yet for the modern era of Battlebots. What's up with that? Greg, Trey, you working on this?
Battlebots needs a video game. They have the merch, they have exclusive video content, toys, RC Battlebots ready to fight in your own home arena, but they still do not have a video game for the modern era. On this episode, we will break down all of the official robot combat video games that have been released to this point, and I'll give you my opinion on where these games excelled in their design and what a new Battlebot video game could look like in 2024. The first game we'll discuss is Battlebots Beyond the Battlebox, the only official Battlebots video game to ever be released for a handheld console. This game was released at the end of 2002 following the Comedy Central era of Battlebots and features some of the most prominent robots of that era, including Ziggo, Backlash, Mouser Mecha Catbot, and more. Published by Majesco and Sierra Entertainment, this version of the Battlebots video game had you build your own creation from scratch using stock-made frames, weaponry, and more, and then fight against the prominently featured Battlebots in the BattleBox itself. Having played this game myself during its release point, I can tell you that this game was quite underwhelming as it was very limited by the console constraints of the Game Boy Advance. While this game gave you custom variability to build your own BattleBot, the options were very limited. There were very few frames, weapons, and mobility options to select from, and ultimately it made it feel like every robot that you would battle was exactly the same. One of the more annoying features of this video game came from the fact that if you had a wedge on your robot and you happened to come in contact with your opponent, it would instantly flip them over, not simulating any bit of what robot combat really feels like. This was, as we said, the only official release of a Battlebots video game. However, Battlebots did have something queued up that was never launched that we'll cover shortly. The next robot combat video games I'd like to discuss are ones from across the world. That's right, the Robot Wars officially licensed video games for the handheld consoles, Game Boy Color as well as Game Boy Advance. Those games being Robot Wars, Metal Mayhem, Robot Wars Extreme Destruction, and Robot Wars Advanced Destruction. As you can probably tell by the footage, once again, these games were highly limited in what they were capable of putting out in terms of robot combat, just due to the limitations of the consoles that they were released on. The first images that you'll see are from the Robot Wars Game Boy Color game, Robot Wars Metal Mayhem. This was a top-down perspective of robot combat, featuring many of the robots prominently featured from the TV show Robot Wars in Great Britain. However, as you can tell from these images, very graphically limited. While prominent robots are featured in this game, it's very difficult to see in the midst of combat the difference between a red blob like Thermidor 2 versus a red blob like Dietoire, as they are in combat in the game. While this game does feature a custom build option, it also lacks in its ability to really feature the thrills and excitement that come from real robot fighting, with a lot of the physics engine not really mustering up to reality. Ultimately, Robot Wars' first outing on the Game Boy Color is not what I would say is a great representation of robot combat itself. Robot Wars' next outings were on the Game Boy Advance as well. Notably, Robot Wars Extreme Destruction, as you see on screen, features a 3D isometric camera perspective, so you can get a little bit more of the features of the robots. You can see through the polygonal models and make out Dead Metal, Sergeant Bash, and all of the other house robots, as well as an arena that's more in line with the actual Robot Wars arena. Custom build features were back, allowing you to build your own robot and fight against many of the prominent robots that you would see on the TV show. However, once again, this game was extremely limited by hardware capabilities and does not have the greatest physics engine or simulation of robot combat. Despite this, it does present with a little bit more charm than some of the other robot combat video games that we have seen to this point. The next game we'll be discussing is Robot Wars: Arenas of Destruction for the PC. Now, this is the first time that we ever got to see robot combat in a video game in 3D. This game at the time had the most features of any robot combat video game to date, including free play modes, tournament modes, a training ground, and a robot workshop, as well as a trophy room. Features of this game included all of the house bots being made, robots from the active TV show such as Razor, Hypnodisc, Mortis, Terahertz, and plenty more. Of note was the most hyper-realistic version that we'd also seen to date of a real robot fighting arena in the actual Robot Wars arena itself, made in 3D with house robots, active hazards, and the ability to throw your opponent over the wall. One of the coolest features of this game was real-life destructible parts. You could see, for example, Razor getting its beak torn off, or witnessing your opponent's armor panels fly off as you bring the carnage to them. While this was the first breakthrough in real-life robot combat brought to you on a video game console, it did not perfectly simulate all of the high-octane action that came from robot combat itself. What do I mean? For one, the physics engine was still not quite up to par, as this was an early 2000s video game and did not perfectly simulate the feeling of pushing your opponent across the arena, flipping them over with your flipper, and more. Of note, one of the cool features from this video game was the ability to play in multiple different arenas, including a missile silo and a warehouse. This allowed a little bit more customizability in between the matches that you'd feature in a video game, and offers a unique feature away from robot combat itself, in that you would fight in areas that you would never normally fight a robot. These features would later be capitalized and expanded upon in Robot Wars' next game for PC. Robot Wars: Extreme Destruction was the sequel to the original Robot Wars Arenas of Destruction on PC and was a significant upgrade in every metric available. Of course, back are the prominent robots from the series of TV Robot Wars, as well as all of the house robots, RefBot, and the arena getting a new coat of paint, making it look more realistic than anything that had come out at the time. This game was a great representation of what it felt like to actually fight robots in an arena itself, as there was very great customizability between weapon systems. Flippers really flipped their opponents, axes really went through the armor, spinners really felt like you hit your opponent across the arena. Possibly the best features of this game came from just fighting the stock robots that were put in there. It really felt like you had your hands on the controls of Behemoth, Chaos 2, Hypnodisc. It really felt like you were fighting robots for the first time on your PC. Back again also were some of the customizable maps, some of which were extremely cool, including battling robots on the Tokyo rooftop, or battling your opponents on top of an actual live battleship, something that you can never imagine to happen in real life. If you are looking for a real-life simulation of some of the actual real robots from the TV show Robot Wars, there's no better option than Robot Wars: Extreme Destruction for the PC. Up next, we have the PC release of the first Robot Arena. Robot Arena was an unlicensed robot combat game made by Infogrames back in the early 2000s. Now, its first release was a very bare-bones robot combat simulator which allowed for custom builds and a campaign mode that featured some quite unique and interesting characters, very similar to what you'd see in maybe a Twisted Metal video game. Now, while you were capable of putting, different custom variable frames, weapons, etc., it still suffered from some of the issues that you would see similar to the original Robot Wars video game, as well as the handheld games like Battlebots and Robot Wars, in that you would have contact with your opponent, but none of the weapons really differentiated themselves from each other. You couldn't really push your opponent around the arena. The combat was very bare bones and lacking, and really just felt like a Rock'em Sock'em Robot Simulator with a fancy veneer on it. However, this would not be the only Robot Arena game to be released on PC, as we move on to what many consider to be the best robot combat video game simulation of all time, Robot Arena 2: Design and Destroy. Robot Arena 2 featured all of the best systems that we've seen so far from all of the robot fighting video games. Had an advanced build-your-own-robot system, probably the best in the entire series, as it had so much customizability. It initially starts out with the ability to design any robot frame or shape via a custom grid making system, making it the closest real-life simulation to computer-aided design simulation. It then allowed for custom armor, as well as a variability of different weapons, saws, spinners, hammers. They had a pneumatic system. They had a 180-degree super fast robot servo system that allowed you to build flippers and hammers and arms and grabbing systems. All kinds of creative variability. Now, this game also came with a bunch of basic robot options that you can enter into a tournament system. This game also had a bunch of prominent robot combat features that extended beyond one-on-one combat, including rumbles, 2v2, custom arenas, tabletop simulation robot fights like Robot Sumo, as well as all of these different tournament features and even an online matchmaking system. Yes, that's right. People actually would build and design their own robots through Robot Arena 2 and compete with each other online. This game featured one of the greatest physics-based combat simulators that you'd ever see, allowing you to have different range of attacks that really felt custom. A flipper system that could launch your opponents into the ceiling, as well as vertical and horizontal spinning systems, pneumatic punchers. I mean, all types of features that you just don't see in all of the other robot combat video games. Of note, one of the most prominent things to come out of this were real robot combat builders that you still see to this day, who initially got their start on Robot Arena 2, believe it or not. Yes, that's right. Even guys like Adam Wrigley, the builder and designer of Shatter on BattleBots on the TV show, started in Robot Arena 2. At the end of the day, there's not much more I can say on this game other than it was a fantastic simulation for its time of what real robot combat feels like, and still has not been outdone to this day. Something that developers should take note of if there ever was to be a new BattleBots video game.
Oh. Hey Builder Blog, I hope you're enjoying this week's episode. Please leave a comment on what your favorite video game is. Later.
Lastly, we have the forbidden video game, which was never released to the public, Battlebots for the Nintendo GameCube. Yes, there was really a Battlebots game that was scheduled to be released on the Nintendo GameCube, and even was prominently featured at Battlebots Season 5 live viewership, where they had kiosks set up where people would wait in line for hours to get a hands-on experience of fighting robots themselves. Now, the Battlebots video game was never completed, but the demo version that we did get our hands on featured some of the most prominent robots of the entire sport, including Ziggo, Backlash, Minion, Biohazard, etc., etc. I mean, it was extreme combat. You got the real feel of fighting robots. You felt the visceral damage coming from spinners. You felt like you were actually getting good flips on the opponents. And there was a wide range of robots from the series, including ones that did not end up on the televised show itself. Fights would take place not only in the BattleBox, but in a bunch of different customizable arenas. This was the closest thing that BattleBots has ever put out to having real robot combat simulated on a video game. While you can't find this copy in the wild, some people have managed to find the source code for the game and are able to play it online on their PC. Now, while I haven't been able to do this myself, I have been able to find some information online that you can find via YouTube if you dig deep enough. The footage that we're using in this video happens to come from a YouTuber by the name of Gatorbox. Go give him a like and a follow if you like some of this content as well. Now, on that note, we have reviewed all of the official robot combat simulation video games that have been released to date. But what would a BattleBots video game look like in the year 2024? In my opinion, the best version of a BattleBots video game would first start with the basics. We need the BattleBox, we need Farouk, Kenny, and Chris all to voice over in this video game. We need all of the prominent robots to ever make it to the tournament section of the BattleBots official TV show to be prominently featured as playable fighting robots in this game. A realistic graphics package and physics engine would be able to take this game over the top and simulate real robot combat at home. Looking at some of the prior released games, we'd take some of the best features, including a custom build-your-own robot feature. I think the Robot Arena 2 grid-based build system is one of the best for making a robot frame, but also being able to use that to create custom parts would be incredible. It would also be great to see some of the materials that you would use have different features. Say, plastic components maybe having more impact damage resistance, but being weak to, flamethrowers or abrasion, cutting, circular saws. Also, the ability to switch between wheel-based systems and walking systems would be the first of its kind. And also, to look back on the prior video games that we've seen, having customizable arenas is a great idea. I would love to see some taking place on dirt lots, sumo arenas, etc. What do you think would make a great BattleBots arena? Now that does it for today's episode, but tell me what you think about a BattleBots video game in 2024. I want to hear what features you would like to see, what robots you would like to see, and more, all down in the comments section. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You
What
like to
are
move
you
it.
even doing?
I'm playing the BattleBots video game. Look, it's a robot, and he's doing stuff.
Why doesn't it move?
Movement is overrated.
I need to see some movement.
Look at his arms. He's moving.
Yeah, but your robot isn't moving.
But his arms are moving.
I think we need a real BattleBots video game.
This is a real BattleBots video game.